Cullen is a picturesque town near where I live in Scotland, and a place I have filmed many videos over the years. However, I almost always paint the coastal view and the sea rather than the town itself. But I am actively trying to improve my speed and accuracy with drawing architecture on location, so I figured this would be the perfect opportunity. Ooh, wow. That is thick. Oh my gosh. Okay, it can get really thin. Wow. Oh, I can draw at the corner. Okay, this is gonna be fun. Okay, so you know how you'll be scrolling on Instagram and you don't ask for it, but suddenly a random video appears of the most satisfying close-up of some paint mixing or watercolor dripping across the paper or a perfectly crisp tape peel. Well, the other day, this pen suddenly appeared on my feed. The most luxurious, juicy calligraphy flowing smoothly across the page, and I was completely mesmerized by the line weights. I'm not a stranger to fountain pens, and I do frequently use them for sketching, but this was different. I have always struggled with the limitations of my pens being too thin. Even the widest nib I own isn't thick enough for my taste. But that's over. This is the Pilot Parallel Pen. I think it's made for calligraphy, but let me tell you, it is an absolute joy to draw with. It comes in various sizes. I got the 2.4 and the 3.8 size. I think it even comes in a 6mm size. It does come with its own ink cartridges, but I prefer to use my own favorite waterproofing, which is the Diatramentis Green Gray. It's waterproof, it works beautifully in all my fountain pens, and I just love that it's not too dark underneath my watercolors, and also on its own it has a beautiful shade of green. I'm making such a mess. Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, that was a good one. Okay. There was a bit of a learning curve when I dropped those first lines onto the page. As you might expect with a fountain pen, the exact angle and pressure dictates how much ink is released and how thick the line is. But that nuance felt intensified by the dramatic width of the metal nib. Where I would normally feel a small contact point with the page, this felt much more like a chisel nib marker. In order to get a perfectly solid, wide line, you have to move the pen a little bit slower and very steady without tilting it too much. Something I'm not used to doing with my markers, and definitely not with my fountain pens. I tend to draw a little bit faster and looser, but after a few minutes, I started to get the hang of it. And by the way, it was only about 4 degrees out, so I was trying to draw fast in order to avoid staying in one spot for too long. I mean, despite the sun, that Arctic wind is chilly.
Can anyone guess what that car is?
Every generic European car. That's what it is. Little squat, tiny little car.
So anyways, the drawing moved rather quickly. What I really loved was the freedom to achieve both hair-thin lines all the way up to large, solid fills within a split second. I would normally draw with a smaller nib, and then I would use a marker or a brush with diluted ink to make my fills and my larger shadows, both of which are enjoyable and create really cool, unique results. But having the option to use a single tool for the entire job put me in a very relaxed mindset, and it just allowed me to enjoy the setting. Sometimes I have decision fatigue when it comes to what materials I take outside. I admit I had a backpack full of supplies just in case I hated these pens. I brought watercolors, markers, lots of other pens. I just wasn't sure. And I'm sure many of you have been in that position where you go somewhere special to draw or paint, but you're plagued with FOMO, wondering if it would have been better or more fun with a different tool. Yeah, that happens to me a lot. So when I find a pen like this, I am a happy camper. This pen certainly has a unique feel to it and creates a unique look. I felt like the results almost resembled a brush pen just because of the huge variety in line weight. I definitely think it will take a lot of practice to get used to using it to create various marks in order to achieve the look that I want, but it's okay because it is so enjoyable to use. From a technical perspective, the pen performed really well. I think I mentioned earlier that in order to create a really solid, thick line, you have to move a little slower and be careful not to lift either of the corners. But besides that, the ink never faltered. It never felt like the ink stopped flowing, which is definitely something I've experienced with some of my other wider nibbed fountain pens. The tip of the nib has some ridges on it, which allows for some added scratchy textures if you move your pen quickly across the page. To draw a very thin line, you can use one of the corners. And I still haven't figured out if one of the corners creates smoother lines than the other, but I'll continue to play with that in time. Otherwise, it seems like it's all about the angle. So if you want to create a thin, a medium, and a thick line, you just tilt it ever so slightly. In order to test the flow and capacity of the pen, I did try to push my drawings and use much bigger, darker areas, create bigger fills. And I kind of thought I might run out of ink before the end of the session, but actually when I got home, I realized I hadn't even gone through a quarter of the ink. The wider 3.8 nib did use a little bit more, which I expected, but just barely. A couple of things I don't like about the pens are kind of small things. For one thing, the cap doesn't fit on the handle. You can't cap the cap. Wait, what do you say? How do you say that? I'm not a pen reviewer, but the cap, it doesn't fit. So you have to just set it somewhere and hopefully you don't forget it. I also didn't love how slick the plastic felt on the handle. I'm more of a fan of the matte finish or something with an edge. So I might actually sand mine down ever so slightly just to feel a bit more of a grip on the handle. But I guess it's a good sign that my dislikes of the pen have nothing to do with its actual performance. Overall, I just really liked how the pen feels on paper. I haven't tried it on super rough paper yet, but this is my 100% cotton Hanamulla sketchbook, so it's got a bit of texture to it. And the ink felt like it was flowing really smoothly. It felt like I could rely on the flow of the ink. And so far, I think my favorite of the two pens is the wider 3.8 nib by a small margin, because I love how quickly I can switch to getting those really thick lines. I think I'll probably keep one of these in my studio and one of them in my sketching bag that I pretty much always keep in the car so that I can have one wherever I am. Next time I take these out, I'll bring my watercolors so I can do some ink and wash painting. So let me know if you have any questions about the pens or want to see something specific with them. And until then, I hope you're all doing well and staying inspired. And I'll see you all next time. Take care.